Hey, are we running? We are. Where's the lights? Oh, yes, the lights are on. Well, welcome to the Real Love Guitar Shed, and out here is a British summer. But dare not open the door too far unless we get rained away. Yeah, British summertime. Anyway, I'm not going to complain about the weather. This hat is vital for getting to and fro the shed. So, first thing I'd like to say is thank you, John Bassett, for another donation to the Reloved Guitars home for the faintly worn out and tired components. And this is a bunch of probably 6 inline tuners, just appeared out of the blue in a padded envelope. I really love that about the people who support what I do. It's just very sweet, they send stuff. Okay, thank you, John. Now today, in this rain, it's going to rain all week, so I think this week is a good week to get some stuff done. So what we have here is, yes, you've guessed it, this is first of Chris's 2 guitars, and here we have, look at this, a Gibson Melody Maker. Dun, dun, dun. No, that's not his strap, I put that on in the house. So yeah, here we have it, and you can see, I'm not an expert on any of these things, so I don't know what's particularly standard and what isn't, but I do guess straight away that this is modified, because I don't think this, well, it didn't come with a pickup at all, unless in the neck, if I remember. It was like a single coil in the bridge. Anyway, he's got 2 Lollar P90s in here, which I've just had a play on. Actually, they really sound great. I do like that. I can't quite describe why, but I do. So there's a lot of this is non-standard. So we've got non-standard bridge. This is a kind of Tone Pros thing. Actually, it's a nice version of, or a slightly different version of this Tone Pros style bridge I've got here, and this is an American copy that I've got, which is brilliant quality for what it is. Does the job really well, and there's a sort of nicer, more up-tempo version. It's got graphite saddles on it as well, which is a nice improvement. It's got that nice sort of shaped back as well. It gives it a nice feel under the hand. So this is so just to let you know, it's also got aftermarket Grover tuners, which are these kind of jazz guitar style things. And it's got a sort of old original cracked nut, which is so far appears to have been working fine, or despite it being a bit ropey shape. But it's the kind of thing that I wouldn't change anyway on a guitar like this, because it's kind of old and of its time. Unless there was an absolute problem, which I haven't detected, it's doing its job okay. So we have this classic beastie. Hold on one sec, I'll take the strap off for a minute, or that end at least. So we have this classic beastie, and I don't know how well you can see, but it's got lovely nitro, presumed checking all over the body, vintage looks. It's got road worn finish, and because this pickguard is different shape from the original, there's a sort of hole left unfilled down there. The original went somewhere else. I think, is that the hole for the original? Can't remember. But it is non-standard, so it's slightly different. I don't know how well this is. Probably not a good idea to be shooting this at bright light anywhere. So we can see the kind of lovely vintage patina, as they say. Lots of dents, buckle rash, wear. We've got these plastic strap buttons. It's a kind of I had a little research, and it's so-called sort of an early precursor to the SG, really, this. I think this looks like about 1963 or 64. Again, I'm no expert in this kind of guitar at all, so I'm just saying what I found. But I think one of the things that I quite like about not being an expert in this sort of guitar is it allows me to pick it up without the sort of the reverence of the fanboy. And I don't mean that nastily. What I mean is that if you know anything about me, you know that I don't really mind, or don't really overly care for big brand names just for the sake of it. So I can sort of much more take it as I find it. So to me, yeah, I get this is a Melody Maker and it's a Gibson, but to me this is a guitar made of 2 bits of wood, effectively, with some nice pickups in it, and you know, what I consider to be a good bridge. I love this kind of single wraparound bridge. I think it's the simplest design you can get, and it gives you all this free space, which I like. So to me, this is a really, you know, it's a simple guitar, and I just can look at it from that, hopefully a slightly more objective point of view. And I mean, it has a beautiful kind of checked, crazed finish, which you can't, well, I suppose people can fake, but it's, you know, classic. It's a great sort of sign of wear and antiquity, which gives it a load of nice character. And the finish and the mahogany and on this all look beautifully dark and smoky, and you know, it kind of reeks of its, it doesn't reek of smoke, it reeks of its, whatever, 50 years of playing. You know, beyond that, it's really interesting for me to kind of get a sense of, well, what do I notice about it, what do I feel about it, if I'm not kind of going, oh, it's a Gibson, it's the best thing ever. Well, it's a Gibson. So a couple of observations straight away. Both this and the SG that Chris has brought me are in for a look over and set up to see, you know, is everything okay? Is there any improvement? Is there anything obviously wrong? And so, you know, again, from the outset, not being overawed by the brand particularly, I'm just going to speak as I find. And I'm conscious, by the way, that this may get me a fair bit more thumbs down than the usual sort of video, which I get a few anyway, because people either hate or like what I do. But yeah, I'm conscious this may well bring some hates, because those who feel they're in the know about these classic venerable objects hate anybody, first off, who doesn't know every little detail. So, you know, I have to kind of always point out that I'm just looking at the basics of this guitar, as far as it's got some frets, it's got a nut, it has some tuners, it has a neck that joins to a body with some pickups and some electrics, right? To me, that's what it is. I get it's got some character and it's got a load of mojo, and hopefully those things combined together, including the nice pickups and the controls and the playability, combine to make a guitar that, you know, explains why that somebody continues to enjoy playing it. So here's what I find about this guitar. I mean, Chris brought it tuned in open G because he uses it for the kind of Rolling Stones stuff. He also has on this guitar 8s, which are very bendy. Now instantly, I'm terrible, I like anything. In fact, I like anything but the regular types, 9s and 10s. So you put me an 11s on a guitar and I go, oh, this feels really different and I like it. You put me 8s on and I go, oh, this feels really bendy and I like it. Put 9s on and go, 9s. But I keep on putting 9s on for some reason. Anyhow, we've got a, like I say, about 63 or 4 looking Melody Maker with Grovers. All the original stuff's been kept, but this has got Grover tuners on here. It's got 8 strings on it. It's got Lollar P90s. I don't know which model that is. Excuse me. And I think probably the original tone pots. I don't even know actually. It wouldn't have had that many controls, so this will be aftermarket as well. And this. So it's a kind of an owner's guitar, set the way somebody likes it. And there you have the Grover kind of toaster type things on the back. You know, they seem to work. They've got really fat posts, if you look at that. I don't know how well you can see that, but they're really thick posts. So that actually, believe it or not, changes the tuning ratio a little bit. So we've got, well, I'm kind of interested, by the way, in this neck joint. If you look at how they did it, I mean, you know, if you went to make a guitar like that today, you wouldn't do that. You'd go, oh, that's ugly, or I don't want these great wadges of wood sticking out either side. But somehow it works, you know, and it worked then, and it gave the neck support. Now, presumably they did it because I don't know, without taking the pickguard off, I would guess that the heel of this, or the tongue of this, I suppose you call it, this neck, doesn't extend much further than there. Because technically, if it did, you wouldn't need all of this support out here. But we won't know until we have a look under the covers, which we might well do, just to make sure everything's all in order. And since we got it here, so there's dings and stuff everywhere, which again you wouldn't mess about with because it's all kind of original and, you know, speaks of the guitar's life. So I've had a play. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang this up a second, briefly. Make sure it's safe, and then I'm going to put the box away, pull out the new 8s. I think have I got some more ordered for the other one? I think both this and the SG have 8s on, I believe. So I'm going to put the box down out of the way. Now I'm going to hang up the camera. And then we're going to kind of plug it in and have a look around. So hang up the camera. Sorry about this. Find the plug-in point. Plug in. There we go. Stick it to the magic arm of magicness, which is looking like I need to overhaul that a little bit. Okay, so the first thing to say, lucky old guitar. First thing to say about this guitar, that when I sat and had a twang of it, first thing I checked was how does it sit? Because if you remember, the SGs typically were often neck heavy, and this is not an SG, but it's kind of similar in shape. But you know, first observation was, wow, that sits really nice. So you've got sort of some of the SG feel, but without any neck dive. And of course, the reason for that is this does extend fair way into the body, technically speaking, whereas on the SG, well, I suppose it's a little bit further out, possibly to about there. So the horns come further out. So there's something about the design of this made the centre of gravity work pretty well, because it's quite a thin body, as you can see. And I had a feeling that straight away that was going to be a problem, but it's not, because of the kind of slight inset, and probably mostly because, well, I don't know, they're smaller headstock. The tuners, you know, would probably add a bit of weight, but all told, it seems to work, which is cool. Now, just coming backwards a second, the tone. Now, this was originally tuned in Open G, so I've spent quite a bit of time retuning it. Now, one of the things I noticed straight away about this guitar is yes, I like the tone from the pickups, but it will not stay in tune at the moment, or it would not. I pulled every time I just pulled it or bent a string, which you obviously want to do with these 8s. It was going out of tune, and if I just were to, I'm not going to do it with a tuner, but let's say I just did an ear tuning. So again, the large size posts actually decrease the gearing effectively, makes it more crude, because it's turning more. I think it's turning more each time. So actually getting fine tunings on the top E seem to be actually quite difficult, or it goes in quite big gross chunks. So tone wise, we've got these two Lollar P90s, which sounds like this on the bridge. Volume, tone. Now for me, they've got quite a nice pop to them. They're very single coil E. And then you play a bit. Start to go out of tune. I've already done about half an hour of stretching in the house, but you'll see that it's still not stable. I can feel it pulling on, actually moving on the peg. There you go. So there's a couple of observations, Chris. There's not enough wire on these tuners at the moment. They're actually slipping when you pull really hard. Now I get that it's good to have a limit to the amount of wire on the tuners, but if there's too little and it moves at all, it'd be counterproductive. If you're trying to reduce the amount of winds and therefore the amount of stored slack, it's probably better to have a little bit more to hold them. and then take it out in stretching rather than run the risk of a movement. So, you know, I keep pulling these and they keep going out of tune. See? So literally I've done about half an hour of constant tuning and stretching indoors, and it's not stabilised. Anyway, we'll take care of that by adjusting how much string is around there on the new strings when we restring it, and also stretching out everything. So there's the bridge sound. And then there's the middle and both on. To a set of, or a bare knuckle. Is that Morris? Morris? Hold on a second. Is that you? Oh, do come in from the wet. Do come up here if you wish. You are wet. How are you doing? People seem to want to see you more in these videos, Mr. Morris, so do say hello, but don't wipe your nose on the camera because that makes things difficult. Morris. Hello. Are you impressed by this vintage Gibson Melody Maker? No, yes, yes, no, yes, yeah. How's summer out there in the rainy garden? We've just put footprints all over here. That's why towel's good. It allows him to dry off after his adventures. He caught a bird the other day. I didn't see it, but he ate it, I think, early in the morning, and then he hacked it all back up, as Claire found out, because he deposited it on the carpet, and feathers and all. So it didn't agree with you, did it, the bird? It was too rich or something, too feathery. Anyway, you alright? Yeah, that's the camera. You know it's there. I've got you. Don't rub your face on it. Come on, this way. No, no, come down this way. Yeah. Play with that. Anyway, so a brief interlude while he gets his needs met. So what do you plan to do? You're going to go and sit down there by the door and keep an eye out, stop the other cats coming in? I'm just going to leave all your fur behind. Come on then. You can come down and sit on here. It's perfect for you. Come on. Are you going to? Come on. Am I just wasting my time? Come on. Ready? One hand. There we go. That's your place. It probably comes straight back. Anyway, so nice pickups. I played these a while in the house, and they've got a very nice single coil. Very single coily twang. They are quite powerful, I think, relative to the bare knuckles that I tested side by side. So it's still not stable in the tuning department. And for some people, if you're heavy-handed like I probably am, that can be due to playing with bendy strings, because the slightest movement will cause them to bend. But that's another indication that the nut slots aren't quite right. If you get to bend your strings, no, Morris, not on the lens. It's a good boy. Come on. Didn't mean to to squash you down there, but I don't want nose. It's got a lens protector on it, this one, thankfully, but I don't want your goo on there, even though I love you very much. Anyway, yeah, so if you, one of the ways of testing or seeing if your guitar has a nut problem is, let's say we tune it back up. Let's say we get to in tune for a split second. Go behind your nut, press each one of your strings right down. Now with an 8th set, this is obviously easier to do, but do it anyway. And what have you got? Sharp. Pull. Flat again. So it's a very quick way of knowing that if you push this under tension here, what you do is you actually you pull this tight and slacken that off there. And what happens is, because it's an uneven pressure effectively, it means the nut is gripping to some degree, gripping the strings, and then when you bend the string, it'll pull that extra bit of tension. It'll even it out usually. It'll allow it to slip back and it will go back to flat or back to normal. But it just means that even though we can't hear it pinging, this is still holding the strings and contributing to this not staying in tune. There's nothing essentially about the tuners and about the strings about this guitar that won't stay in tune, but the nut is gripping and the strings need to be fully stretched out in order for it to stabilise. Because right now, I'd be just so annoyed. I wouldn't want to play this because every time I pick it up, it's going out of tune. So it's not a massive deal, but it's something that can make a difference between you wanting to play the thing or not. Just a quick listen under kind of more classic-y rock tones or high gain. It's actually relatively quiet. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. Ouch. Okay, it was relatively quiet. It's some way of picking up bad connections. So it's interesting, we've got, so we've got a grounding thing going on here. So that's not ideal. We do need to have a look under there. Let's have a look around, make sure we'll see what we can see. So this lovely old thing, let's put this downstairs a minute. We have a guitar with pretty much a lot of upgrades and changes, but it's still, as you can see, a lovely old Mojo-esque vintage guitar, and the owner has all the original stuff, so if he wants to put it back to the original, sell it on, then he can certainly do that. Wow, look at all this goo. But we have some, we've got, is it a loose? Don't know if the jack's loose, but or it's touching something under there, but it's suffering slightly from grounding issue there. So it's a guitar with fairly worn frets. It's got a dent, or somebody's carved a chunk out of the fingerboard there. Fairly worn out frets. Not a lot of room there for any fret leveling, but we have a relatively low action to kick off with on this guitar, and it feels good. And I said to Chris, I'm not entirely sure there's an awful lot of immediate improvement you can make on this for what it is. So it's 1.5 and about 1.5 on the other side. So and with a strings as bendy as this, what you really want is the action you've chosen to play. And as to be fair, most of it does. The only thing you might want to do is take that down a tad to on the high E. But then, you know, if this is being played as an open G tuning, it might be. I'm just listening to what Chris said. It sounds like he mostly plays rhythm, you know, Keith Richards sort of rhythm guitar with less in the way of individual kind of lead guitar playing. I'll just take this down just a fraction. Notice I've got my Protector Matic Gorilla tape on there, but you know, it isn't far off. That's good. It isn't far off spot on really, other than the fact it won't stay in tune and we've got some sort of grounding issue going on underneath the hood. So we're going to re-string it. We're going to put new strings on. I'm not even going to attempt to clean up ancient vintage goo on the fingerboard, because this guitar is not about cleaning it up. If somebody said to me, I want you to clean this up, then maybe. But this is in its mojo-tastic state. I might, you know, you can take the dust off the headstock, for example, but I wouldn't even be getting the solvents out onto this. I'm concerned about making this nut play. It's currently, you know, quite right. Somebody's set the nut slots very low, and in doing so, they've ended up with shark's teeth, which is unsurprising. That is a chunk of, oh, that's left over from me, that's a chunk of bolt that I've chopped off the bottom of a pickup adjuster. So we've got a very low, deliberately low first fret action. We've got nut slots that are gripping a little bit, so we need to take care of those width-wise. They're not actually, when I look at it, they're not actually brilliantly even. They sort of slope off a bit sideways because they look to me like they've been done with a not a typical nut file. So they may have gone wandering a little bit, but they're not too bad at all. Pickups sound great. So really it's a matter of, I've dropped the top E action just a fraction. And it plays on all the notes. The only place there is a hint of zzz, and that's not really that serious, is around here, which suggests that it's maybe a tad too flat for its own good, which in fact it is. It's kind of dead flat. But I'm not going to make too much of an adjustment. If I made any adjustment at all, it would be just a tiny bit, because the straightness of this neck will contribute an awful lot to how it feels to play. So if I were to go and give that little bit of extra room to even out this little bit of zizz down there, then it, you know, I'd have to be very careful, because I don't want to change significantly the way it feels to play. But it is in really good shape, other than the tuning stability and this ground issue that I've picked up. So just judging by this, I don't think there's any fret leveling or anything like that needing doing, which is really good, because there just isn't enough fret metal to make me want to do it or to feel in any way comfortable doing it. So I'm kind of happy about that. So I'm just going to have a look under the truss rod thing. Now my adjuster is over there. I've got the Gibson style one stuck to a magnet somewhere nearby. And there we have it. Oh, these are thicker, aren't they, than the regular ones, so I don't know if I can actually, yeah, I can get it out, come on. Okay, so there's your characteristic Gibson truss rod adjuster, the sort of brass end thing. I'm just looking at this nut. I'm gonna need to widen the slots, but the action over the first fret is incredibly low. So if there's any hint that it goes any further, then this will be needing replacement, which I'd rather not have to do, because it's a custom size and I'd need to make one from scratch, which means running the risk of, you know, tiny millimeter fraction differences in getting the string spacing. It's quite difficult to do by hand. Even if you have a guide with the things printed, or you use this one as the start point, it's still quite difficult to do. But I would tell you now that the first fret action on this guitar on the D is the lowest, and it's it will be, if that's 1/10 of a millimetre, you'll be lucky. So that's practically on the fret, and it's a little bit higher out here, so it varies a tiny little bit, but that D is almost entirely on, almost on the fret, and you can hear it. That little zzz that some people might think of as fret buzz, that's coming from a hard hitting string, just making tiniest contact with the first fret. Now one way to cure that is to raise the action all the way up here. Another way to cure it is to add in a bit of neck relief, because by definition it will create a bit of a curve away. But neither of those are ideal solutions if you like a low light playing guitar. Those are gross attempts at solving a problem where in fact the problem is in the way the nut is cut. So as with all these things, whatever the make of the guitar, a lot of this was about trying to address the thing that's wrong. So, you know, people say, oh, my action is high, and they go, well, crank the truss rod. Well, the truss rod isn't the primary means to adjust your action. The bridge and the saddle, the bridge and the nut are the primary means. Of course, adjusting the truss rod, changing the relief curve of the neck from flat to more bowed or more relieved, of course that changes the action in the centre or middle part of the neck. But it's like I've said this on another video yesterday, to great length, it is a secondary effect of adjusting the truss rod, which you do for another reason, and that is only to give your strings enough room to spin without doing that. Now, you know, if you don't hit the strings that hard, then the combination of the action, the low frets, and the relatively level frets, plus the height of this bridge as it stands, are pretty much all enough to rule out almost all but the slightest bit of fret slap that result from the first fret action being quite low. So the question for me is, this is somebody's special guitar. I want to replace these things as a last resort, because it changes, you know, won't look quite the same. This has a look of age and, you know, road wear and so on. However, as I say, I noticed straight away this is very low. It's playably low. It's in conjunction with a very flat relief, which adds to the likelihood of the frets slapping out, shall we say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get my Gibson adjuster, and I'm going to just reduce a tiny bit of the slacken just slightly the truss rod. Now it feels like it's almost slack as it stands, so we may be in a situation where there is no more relief that we can get out of this. Yeah, see, that little bit of fret slap is coming from a fretted. With it. Oh, maybe that's still adjusting then, because that just cleared up. Okay, we have a bit more now. Okay, we're getting a bit out of the E, and that's all the way along, see. Now that's not fret buzz, that's fret slap, and that's because the E string moves too much for the amount of clearance that it's got. However, it's not, I mean, having to hit it quite hard to make it behave, and to me that's actually quite, it's kind of acceptable, you know, as a trade-off for the low action. So I'm not going to adjust any more. I'm going to leave the tiny bit more relief that I've put in. You can see it now, tiny bit more room. Again, that's sub a tenth, that's still below 1/10 of a millimetre of action, and I would say that the adjuster is now almost completely slack, so we're probably at the limit of what the curvature that a set of 8s, which are pretty light gauge, can pull into this neck by default, but it just happens to be just about okay. Now, having done that, that actually that alone gets rid of the slight that we were getting in the middle part. That's good. So that miniature little adjustment has taken away the slight that was happening on bends down here. Now, next thing in this, I'm nervous and concerned slightly about this, the state of the grounding issue here, and I might need to plug it back in and just have a feel. There's so many things at issue, pots, switches, that's moving, that isn't good for a start, that's all over the place, right? So that's a culprit, or suspect I should say. So I think we need to get this off, tighten those up, check the connections and make any resolder or anything that looks like it's moved or broken off. But the bit that slightly bothers me here is these nut slots, because they are clearly holding some, preventing it from going into staying in tune, and it's actually quite difficult to see microscopically what's going on. The first thing of all is that they are quite deep slots and they are quite sort of raggedly cut. So within this nut, I don't know how well you can see this. The first thing we can say is that there is quite a lot of excess material above the where the strings sit that is unnecessary and actually only does two things. It either, if it's a straight walled slot, it serves to provide friction, or at best it just looks snaggle toothed, right? Which is only a cosmetic thing. So the first thing I'm going to do with this nut is I'm going to oh well, just before I do anything, the thing about this is that it looks old mojo and it's got grime and stuff and there's bits split off the top. My instinct with an old nut like this is to first of all make sure it's wide enough, but then to really get rid of any excess material way above this, because it doesn't need to look like this. It's too much material sticking up and it gives you that sort of slot look to it. But in a way that's slightly the aesthetic side of it. What concerns me is there is some friction here, but there is literally no leeway in terms of taking down. I cannot even afford to dust the bottom of this slot with a piece of sandpaper in my attempts to make sure that it passes through here friction free. And the reason I can't is because with even the tiniest whiff will take this down and it'll be sat on there. Now an alternative to this would be to take this off altogether, and actually if you want to keep the mojo colour of the nut and so on, is actually glue another very thin piece of bone and shape it to fit exactly under here, of the same kind of slightly unbleached or a mixture of sort of old bleached bone. So you could actually boost this up, put a little foot on the bottom of it, which looks fine. But again, with an old guitar like this, I'm very loath to take off the nut, because it's pretty well fitted and it's sort of set in its ways, you might say. So as currently it plays great, I'm just concerned about the friction on it, and I can see that where it's been cut, it's pulling, it's not sitting exactly, it's pulling this friction because it's pulling, in this case it's pulling that way, in this case it's pulling that way. The rest run relatively straight, notwithstanding there is a little bit of an angle. It's obviously the B and the A run pretty much straight, but the most extreme angle is probably these two E's. And you know, as far as I can get in close and look at this thing, these are a little bit raggedy, these slots. Now one of the things I can do is, as I would do, is I can take my V notch and I can just feel my way into the slot as is. Now I'm avoiding the front edge of this slot at all costs, and this little bit of cutting can sort of tell me how much overhang I've got, and it can also show me, kind of give me a sense, and also I can find this out by moving the string about, you know, what is the kind of smoothness or otherwise of this this nut slot. Now like I said, what I really don't want to do at any cost is to end up with this driving down the front or cutting down the front edge. So you'll notice I'm sort of over you know, leaning back more than normal, just to kind of make sure that it's a clear. To me that feels feels all right. And that returns to pitch as well. So I'm not going to do anything else with that one. Once I'm happy that they run smoothly, whatever I need to do to them, then I can still take down this some of this raw material on the top of here because it's unnecessarily tall. It'll have the effect of tidying it up visually, which may or may not be to Chris's liking. So I'm just now kind of going down into this slot, second slot, and again avoiding the front edge because I don't want to lower this any further than it already is. That's staying in tune when I press backwards, which is quite good. Let's try this one. Holding on a bit, but this one seems to be sliding sideways. Now again, I'm kind of nervous about getting the actual gauge of God, I can see it. It's like a stepped thing from hell. If I were to put my file in for the right size, Lord knows where it will end up. Again, the precious thing is not to adjust the height of these slots. I'm sort of fighting to preserve that whilst cleaning out or tidying up, if you like, the remains of the slot, so we can ensure that this thing passes smoothly. There's some tension held here in this G, but it's so low to begin with. I'm very nervous about going anywhere near the front edge of that slot. I'm trying to clear it out without lowering it, and it's just quite tricky. Now a little guide is the front edge of the nut slot tends to have some grime on it. That actually feels better.
3 of your 5
oh my goodness.
a day.
What service. Thank you, sweetheart. Look at this. This is why you work for yourself and you have a great assistant. Thank you. She was going to come here and help me tidy up the shed a bit later on, but look at that. That isn't even it's like a show home of a breakfast. I mean, it is, what time is it? 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock?
Yeah, 1:30.
But whatever, breakfast in my world. So I'm going to go off camera and listen to the radio, and we'll come back and finish freeing up these slots. Then I'll tidy up, so it'll actually lose this kind of discoloured broken bit, but you have to be very careful we don't split anything off further than that. And it stopped raining heavily, so I can open the door. See you in a minute. Bye. Was that delicious? Fruit salads. Anyway, I was just listening to the radio, and I heard somebody talk about Trump's visit to the UK, and somebody used the word, the optics about this are good, or something like that. And it just really bugs me, the use of the word optics. I had to look it up. And I asked Wikipedia, probably a bad move, but anyway, I asked Wikipedia what she thought of it. And she said, it's first and foremost a branch of science concerning this, light and I am seeing. Secondarily, it means the way something looks in American political slang. So the optics look good. Anywho, so look, I just had a couple of root around, and when I think about this, is the spacing of this nut is unusually wide. And actually, One could argue that it's fractionally too wide for this fingerboard as it is. So this fingerboard actually wouldn't hurt from having a narrower nut. So, you know, this is right on the edge and it's on the slope as well. So having just put away my various nuts, what I did originally is I pulled out a yellowing version which could be used. Now, like I said, my first impression was actually it's too narrow, but having said that, this is very close to the edge, so we could, as a fallback, we could have that as an option. However, I also pulled out a bone blank because it's, anyway, we've got similar sort of unbleached or semi-bleached bone colour, and we could make a direct replacement, sand it down and so on. That's an option. The other option is to put a little foot on this thing. Now, at present this is slightly whiter than the that bone, so we might want to cut a piece of this and sand this down and use the sort of yellowness of one of these. But the principle would be the same. We use the same nut and we just shim it a little bit, glue it to it so it's part of the same thing. You wouldn't see the difference. Sand it gently back into shape, and then what we've got, in fact I might, you know something, I might be tempted to do that because what I'm worried about here is this is too low to begin with, and I'm fighting with a nut to widen some gripping slots that are already problematic. I think I'm going to cut a sliver of this, just make sure it fits the whole way along. I'm going to cut a sliver of this and I'm going to step this up, glue it on, sand it down to shape, step this up, and then we're going to basically recut in the bottom of these slots till I'm happy that they're all at the right height. Then we're going to remove the material on top. That's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use these old strings to cut them back, and we're going to go back to no more than 0.25 of a millimetre of first fret action, because clearly Chris is used to it having very little. However, it is currently in my book a little bit too low, in that you don't have any, you're getting fret slap, a little bit of fret slap. Now there are those who now look at this and they go, well, how do you get this nut out of here, because it's probably stuck in there, glued in there. Basically all you've got to work with, I don't know, you won't be able to see this a second, is you do have a nut, a slot, a blade, and you can basically cut along the nut to try to loosen off this, because what I don't want to have happen is for this to snap in one go when I try to knock it off. So I'll do a little bit of kind of help. I'll try and buffer it and spread the load if I can. Typically it will be probably absorbing a bit too much of the blow as well. So I don't want to hit it on any one particular area more than another. So I'm trying to do a bit of knocking all the way along the length, and that's probably not the best tool to do it with. So let's use a piece of wood without the sandpaper on it. But something of this shape will do. That needs replacing anyway. Quite a useful little tool for making, actually that's probably almost as good directly off that. So this is well stuck in, and there we go. Okay. Well, that brings with it a little bit of the paint finish, but that's the truth of it. It's impossible to get it out without cutting more and more, which we've already done. So I'm going to lift that up, and I'm going to take that off and stick it back down separately if I can. So you get a little bit of wood, but that's because it's been very well glued in place. And we'll stick it back down. The question is, am I able to remove it from here as one piece? Let's try. Let's get a bit of wood. that edge, let's use that flat edge. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press this down on here to support it, and I'm going to bend this away like that. There we go. That has recovered me most of the bit that came up, so that's fine. I'm going to in fact I'm going to just take this out of the way for a minute because they're a bit too close in for my liking. Yeah, I mean, as you know, if you've seen what I do anyway, the focus for me is absolutely on the nut and the, well, primarily or very strongly on the nut. If this thing doesn't stay in tune, then it's just not a good guitar, as simple as that. So getting this nut right is critical. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and cut that separately. The nut is good. It's been cut down from the bottom. Somebody's drawn a line on it, and I'm pretty certain it has. But it's intact, which is great. Which means we can square this off and add a little bit of, maybe even too yellow. Add a little bit of that colour bone to the bottom of it, and then we'll shape that up to match perfectly. And then meantime, I will get this little piece of flakiness back into there and reattach it, and then once that's set we'll just clean out this slot. I've got a very fine chisel over here that we can use if we need to, but prefer to try and avoid that. This hopefully should be already flat cut once this little flake is back in. It's very thin flake, but I was lucky I could get it all off the bottom of the nut. Okay, so let's get some glue at the ready. Some cocktail sticks, you might call it. Now, super glue has a fabulous habit of going everywhere you don't want it to go, and that's just how it is. If you try and put paper down to protect it, it'll wick its way under that paper, and it will do its thing anyway. There's almost no way of stopping it. But what I kind of was wondering is, if I just borrow this as a marker, that's probably a good idea. Then I just want to, I'm trying to just make a point where I can see how much or little glue I need to put on. So I'm just going to use this as a sort of marker, and I'm going to tilt it. No, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to use it as a marker. I'm going to draw a very faint line there, and a very faint line there, if you can see it. Right. Actually, I probably would be better off drawing a faint line all the way along, because what I'm trying to do is just mark something so I don't put glue inside of that. I don't want a whole set of glue sticking up. I just want enough to fit this little flake back in, so I can see that it also goes some way. See, this is very thick. I'm going to reject that. It's going to come, some of the mahogany is going to come further in if we're going to replace it all, which I might as well, since it's one piece. Right, that's fairly runny. Okay, well, even if a bit of glue sticks out of the side. That was lovely, thank you.
Do you feel healthier now?
Oh yeah, not half.
The sun's coming out.
I know.
Morris is sitting on your workbench and he's all warm.
Oh, bless him. To get this nut out, this bit of the old mahogany came out with it. But such is life.
How old is that guitar?
Watch this. So,
Do you think?
it's sort of 1963-ish, something like that.
Your age?
Right.
How are your bits of mahogany holding on then?
They're falling apart too. In you go, in you go, in you go, into position. Thanks, friend. There we go. Look at that.
Oh, I've got to find you some more of those.
Some more of what?
The cocktail sticks.
Oh yeah. So I'm pressing down on that just to make sure it's in, flat.
Oh.
What was that?
Oh, yummy. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's in a really bad mood.
Oh, she's hissing, is she?
She's hissing now. She's clawing. You are. I shall return
Oh yeah.
a bit later on to try and.
Help me, organise me.
Well, I've been trying that for a very long time, but you know, we'll keep on.
Keep on keeping on.
Gosh, you really need another benchy bit, don't you?
Well, I need a benchy bit, that benchy bit, not to be covered up in stuff that I put to one side briefly.
Too. Yeah.
Okay. It's good.
And some drawers.
That's
over
done.
there.
So that's that done. Top of this.
Right. See you in a while.
Okay.
Where's your
I might, if can you, it's on top of the buffer.
Anything else in here?
Yeah, could you?
Amnesty?
No, could you?
Aha.
No, yeah. Could you stick a metal stick in one of the hammocks to open it out so it dries?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then while you're at, no, I'm joking. Right, there we go. That's that replaced back in there. And technically, we could have clamped it a little bit, or we could have put the strings back on and pushed it down. But what is? Oh. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to end up getting this nut stuck back in before we've done the adjustment to it, right? So that is going to be how it is, and we'll work with that. When we put that back in, that will fit very nicely, and this will sit on there very nicely too. Okay, so I'm just using these as sort of, what's the word? Clamps, adjustments. Right, I'm going to put this, hang this up for a minute with strings akimbo. You are safe up there? Yes, you are. Next stop is going to be stick. No, that's a good one. Take this over. Well, do a couple of things. I'm going to just. We'll need this out anyway. So I'm just going to take the little bits of wood and go off the underside of this till it's nice and clean and flat. Mainly, that's the most important thing. Okay, nice. And is it flat, or we've got a little bit of a lip still? Okay, that feels pretty good. We'll need to do some sanding when we get there anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, basically I'm going to cut me a strip of this. Now ideally the thinner I can make it, the better it will be, or the easier it will be, but it's not the end of the world because I can carry on sanding it back, and there is also a limitation to what realistically I can cut with a bandsaw, which I'm going to do off camera, out of sight right now. So I kind of aim for that as a start point, and then the idea will be to glue it to this, shape it to size, and then we'll go back in with this as the correct size thing. Also, I'm just getting rid of a little bit of the gunge on the inside face of this, so that's ready to be worked on. Right, bit of bandsawing. There, bandsaw on. Piece. Now there is our sort of ready-made flat side, which I will just clean up briefly, and then we'll attach that to the bottom. So there we have it. That's going to be our little foot. This is actually, it's dirty on the outside, but funnily enough, when you get underneath this, it's actually much bleachedier. It's just got some grime on the surface. It might be cigarette stuff from years of, you know, gigs and clubs and whatever. Okay, so I'm gonna use some slightly thicker glue here, and I'm going to just double check which is my, here's my working side. And to begin with, all I have to do with this is chuck a load of this on here. This is my fretting glue. Usually this pot is nice and thick, doesn't run around and get out of control too easily. So I get my nice flat side and I push the two together and press them down like that, and then you can kind of push them around for ages until they stick. So it probably would be good to have that clamped somewhere. Now I'm just looking, that's overhanging quite a bit, so let's just make sure that's sitting on there before it gets, it's too late and we can't undo things. Thank you. I have a feeling this will stick. Oh crap. Not like that, it won't. Let's try that again, shall we? That's the problem with this, is it's an odd shape, so when you press down it tilts forward. Just stick. There is an accelerator, but it kind of, in my experience, it doesn't really get to where it needs to go. It accelerates around the edges of things, and if you need to, you know, if it's between the faces, it's not going to get in there. So anyway, so there's the extension on there, and I'm just going to leave that set for a while. Looking at this now, if that doesn't feel right, then we could always put this bit on, which it makes it even whiter. Now let's stick with what we've got. It'll do. Right, so as you can see, the idea will be to use this as the guide for the thickness and the size of the nut, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of sacrifice the existing ragged nut slots that have been made with different things over the years, and we're going to go in with the correct nut files and just go to exactly the action we want, and then I will take away the excessive material above there that isn't doing us any good. Now, you know, that was the reason for taking it off to do it, because, you know, the point about that nut is the way it was, we were never going to get it to be smooth running without taking the nut slots down. You're constrained by that ultra low action on the on those couple of strings. So we've kind of had to take a bit more serious remedial action, and the point is, it's critical to the guitar staying in tune. So it's not really much of an option. You've got to do it if you want the thing to play properly. So that's what it's about. So I could fire a bit of accelerant at it now, if I'm in the mood. That sort of will help just to solidify the stuff that's on the outside. It means I can get on and shape it down neatly now. So we're very close. So I'm going to use the sandpaper to just work my way down to the position I want to get to, and we'll know when it is because we'll just start to contact the edge of the old nut itself, and we'll know to stop. But I'm sort of doing it at an angle to begin with, and then bringing it to meet the existing body of the nut. So it's quite a way off yet, and we'll do the same on all sides, and then we'll concentrate on squaring the bottom off. Now all we need for this is really about 0.5 of a millimeters worth of additional material on this nut, so it's going to be very little overall, but it's critical that we get it, because then it gives us gives us more downward cutting, which is the kind of extra space we need to clear out these nut slots to make sure that they actually work and it's assist in keeping this guitar in tune, versus stopping it getting in tune, which feels like it's what's currently happening. Okay, so I'm coming close to straight line with the original face of the nut, which I then will want to gently sand until it just cleans it up. It doesn't really have to, but it's good if it does, because I mean it's going to be hidden, but I'd like it to be more precisely straight than not. So to get it, I'm pushing a bit off center on this so that we basically take down this extra bit first, and that's just lifting the flat bit slightly off the ground and then letting it fall back down, and we'll bring it all back down to the same level together like that. So it's a nice sort of way of just increasing the whole size of the nut, and then we can just lightly sand it to a smooth, again without doing any significant reshaping. Okay, nice. Then we do the same again to the back section, remembering that we want to cut downwards most of the material, so tilt helps until we get very close, and then we kind of round off the whole lot together. There's still quite a bit of excess material to take away. Yeah. Right, there we are, we've reached it on that end, so we need to just make sure we get it on this end as well. Nearly. Actually, quite difficult to, you can't really do this by any measurement. It's definitely a feel thing. You sort of know when you get there, or you know when you're there, sort of thing. Okay, that'll do for now on the back edge. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to concentrate on the flatness of the underside before I take off any overhangs on this edge. And the reason for that is that to kind of do this, well, there's no real reason actually. You do either or in that order. It's probably actually, reflecting, probably better to do this bit first while it has some thickness and is less likely to break off in some unexpected way. Now I'm just doing this from the vertical by eye, really, as close as I can get. But it is only gauged by eye, and then a bit of rounding it off. Okay, and that we'll carry on there in a minute and clean that line up too. So this is probably just about good as it stands, and then it also needs just a little bit of round off there. Right, now onto the vertical, and this is quite tricky to get it to do a 90-degree cut, so you have to just, if you're good at judging these things, then it will work. If you're not, you might have to keep a very close eye on it, and then you can see where it's not 90 degrees and then it's leaning too far forward, so I'm going to just push it back a fraction and let the sanding kind of catch up until it's flat again. Very, very delicate, and you can make quite a lot of alterations as you go. So now I can see this is still over 1 millimeter, so I've got plenty of time stroke room to remove this material, because I don't want that much of a boot on this thing. So I'm just going to keep taking it down. While I've got a lot of room to play with, I don't have to be quite so careful, but I have to be conscious of, you know, the point where I'm starting to get to the thickness I'm aiming for, and then I have to be much more precise. So looking at this, it's straight on that side, but it's a little bit, actually it's not bad, straight on that side. Straight on that side, it's this line here that isn't straight, but it's going all right. So once you get the flat or 90-degree angle, if you're careful and slow down with the pressure, you can tend to continue it quite well. But it's always stop and check, and if you're going off again, like I'm leaning too far this way now, then you just adjust by leaning back a little bit and letting it ride along that edge until it levels back out on itself. Now of course you've only got ultimately so much you can do that, so long you can do that for, and then you eventually get to the point you want to be at, and you put it on there and you go, wow, that's really tall now, relatively speaking, but that's fine, because I would rather have more room to adjust this downwards than less. So I'm going to stop it there. I'm just going to clean up this back edge here, because that's going to be visible, so I want to just, if I can, remove this black line. So I've just got to make this meet up at that point. There we go. That's pretty much gone. Okay. So bring this back down. Now realistically I should have probably just have done this the other way around. I should have fashioned this to shape, then dropped it in there, and then used the strings to press down on the repair piece, which would have just helped. It would have acted as a clamp to hold it in place. Now like I said, this originally in my book is too wide a spacing for this guitar, but you know, it's what Chris has been used to up till now, so you have to be sort of sensitive to what's technically right and what somebody's been used to, and kind of, you know, balance it around that. There's no point in changing something so much that somebody doesn't recognize it or like it, you know, just because you're technically right that that's now the correct width, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this gives me a ton of room back to work these frets, these slots back to where they should be. Don't mind the bone dust kicking around at this point in time, that's less important. And then I also, you know, this, like I say, if I'd been thinking a bit better, I would have used this to glue the little chip out piece back in place, because that would have been kind of handy to have. The strings are very good for doing that. Like I say, don't worry about the bone dust and stuff, we'll clear that up later, because there is going to be some more coming up. Right, so this thing wants to stick down already, blimey. So yeah, it's just wider than I would like. Also, it's slightly, the alignment down here isn't perfect either, so this really could benefit from, well, yeah, the alignment isn't perfect. And that's a positioning of the bridge issue, but again, it's not something that Chris will have suffered from or worried about up till now, so let's not try and address that. Massive high action now, brilliant. It's obviously too high, so I'm just going to measure how much. Oh, good blimey. Pulling through the peg head. Right, so back to here. Currently now we have an action that's that much too high, which is amazingly. We can afford to a mixture of taking some from the underside of this and some from above. Just looking all round at this, I would be This is actually, I have actually physically positioned this just a tad further to the bass side, I guess you could say, than it was before, because this is so close to the edge. I just don't feel comfortable putting it back dead flush with where it was. There's room, a little bit more room on this bass side, so technically speaking, if this was my guitar, I probably would have gone for the slightly narrower spacing and allowed it to bring this inward a little bit, which would have sort of, wouldn't have balanced it, but it would have made it look a little bit less extreme at this end. But it's not my guitar and I'm not used to playing it, so I'm going to get it as good as it can be as is. Now, the thing to do is we can take a straightforward approach. I can either remove a bit more material from under here, and let's just measure how much physically we've got, just as a quick guess. Don't have any. This is 30, 40, 70. 70 plus 60 is 70 plus 60 is 130, right? Okay, so we've got 130, 1.3 mils. Still, we can go down with a bit of room there. So I'll take a bit more off, and then we'll do the rest with the downward cuts, which is kind of where we're aiming for. Look at that, another blatant piece of this stuff jumped off. Flaky old beast. Perhaps I should have fired some more of the what's that stuff? Accelerator at it. Get it to stay put. The reason I didn't, by the way, is I don't want to shoot this accelerator anywhere near nitrocellulose, because it's quite a something or other substance. It interacts aggressively with materials like paint, so I don't want to do that. And these sticks always break when you don't need them to. Okay. You can go there. You can go over there for a minute. You can get out of the picture. And we're going to take, let's say 1.3. We're going to take a bit off of here. We're going to take a bit off here. I'm noticing that this is a bit wider at that end than that end. I'm not going to do any more with that. Right, let's take a bit of material off here. Okay, that's taking it using the more brutal sandpaper, because I'm taking a fair bit off. Actually, the sandpaper is a bit worn out now, so it's not really taking that much off by comparison. Time to replace it, actually. Okay, nice and square. I feel good about that. I'm going to stop there. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to probably just make life difficult for somebody in the future, because I'm going to do my own bit of glue vandalism, relatively speaking, and put a little, hopefully a small dab of glue either side for this, and press this into place. And then we'll use, as mentioned before, this time I'm going to use the strings as the clamping mechanism to hold it in place while it dries, and then everything from there onwards is going to be done with downward cutting. So is that seated right? That's a little bit tilting. straight as it can be. Yeah, thank you. Exactly where it needs to be. So take a note again. Don't worry about the tuning per se for a second. Let's get these on. Okay. I'm just going to tap this a couple more times just to make sure it's sitting where I want it to. Get in there, thank you. Yup, 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 yup. Okay. Don't worry about the pings. Okay. I don't really know why that's got an unscrewable head to it, but anyway it does. Right, so what I will next do now is, all things being equal, the neck relief and the action already preset, I'm now going to go down to 0.3, which is still going to be higher by some standards than how Chris originally had it. But we're going to now take this down using a combination of the correct file. To begin with, I'm going to use this V-notch file. And this is going to do the sort of lift, the heavy work. So it's going to take us right down, carve all the way down to where we want to get to. And then at the end of there, I'm going to round out with the correct file. And then I'm going to take the excess material off the top when all's finished. So this way of doing it uses the V file as a sort of heavy lifter, does the hard work. Now some people like to mess around going sideways, and actually, having thought about that an awful lot, it seems to me that you don't really gain anything by doing that. If you have a string that has to go off in one direction or another, it's going to go off in that direction whether you like it or not, and it's going to go there at one point or other. Now whether it bends at the front edge, I'm just going to do a bit of this too, by the way. It either bends at the front edge, or if you want it to, by moving the slot, it bends at, sorry, if you leave the slot straight, the string bends at the front edge, no, rear edge, and if you angle the slot, it bends at the front edge. So truth is, you have no way of stopping it bending unless you put in a bearing or some sort of sideways thing, which is kind of crazy because you're really you're starting to get into some bizarre mechanism now to solve an age-old problem. So my advice is, accept that it's going to bend at some point in its travel, and get over it. Just make it as wide as it needs to be and as smooth running as it needs to be. So right now I'm working on this slot depth, tilting backwards to ensure that the break angle is good, and this time we're going to stop at close to the 0.3 mark. Now if it doesn't get there, I can then go back to my V file and kind of cut down a bit further, which takes it, it's a quicker thing, and then knowing when to stop at the sort of right kind of level, and then revert back to the nut file for that gauge of string. And that file really, its main purpose is to, you could say, sort of bottom out the slot into a nice smooth profile to fit the string, and really just it avoids the string sitting in a V notch. But these things, they really don't cut as well as a lot of other things do. I mean, they can also get worn, they don't last forever. Dust. So you can see the depth of the slot now, and it looks pretty terrifying, but we're now very close to the ideal action for this string. So what I'll do is I'll get to that action, and then I will stop. Right, there we are, just about playing, and then we move out to the next one, and this, all of this excessive height will be disappeared when we remove this excess material. Okay, that's the game. So it's kind of boosting for you know, to gain the footing to go back down and cut the slots the way I want them. And you know, not for any other reason than to ensure that this guitar stays in tune from the outset, providing of course that the slack is removed from the strings, which is a vital part of keeping it in tune. You've got to do that. If you don't, it can be still kind of going out of tune literally years after you've restrung it, which seems absolutely mad, but it's an incredible amount of time that it continues to hold the slack. Well, yeah, if we can call it that. It can be years. And I've had guitars given to me that people say they they changed the strings a couple of years ago, and they've had on the wall and played it off and on over the years, and I get it and bend some notes and it still goes straight out of tune, which is incredible. So you can see these great big shark's teeth here, which right now are terrible looking, but we're getting, the kind of important bit was to buy ourselves the nut material to arrive at the correct first fret action, which, unlike previously, is going to be the right height, and hopefully, because of these files, almost exactly the right width. And then we'll take care of the cosmetic aspect afterwards, i.e. the snaggly shark's teeth sitting up. That's kind of less important. So we're still a little way to go, not much. But you know, I'm pretty certain that some people will think that it's a wickedness even to stick an extra piece of bone to a Gibson nut. You know, that's some sort of travesty committed. But what is the point of your Gibson? There you go, if it won't stay in tune, and it won't stay and play in tune. First two done, and we're going at the 0.3, which is a little up on what Chris had before. Now this one worries me slightly because it's right next to the edge, and if I have to dig or cut down too far, if anything, what I don't want is to A, break off a whole chunk of this, and B, I don't want the kind of line to wander inwards. Now chances are it's going to be difficult to keep this cutting straight without something breaking. It's very close to the edge, but that is how it was. So just kind of trying to consciously not turn it in exactly, but just make sure that if it's angling anywhere, it's angling just on the inwards side of out, if you get what I mean. On the inside of out. Okay. But it's like walking on the edge of a very steep cliff. If you don't tell yourself it's a very steep cliff, you just keep gently walking along, watching your balance, everything should be alright. There is not a 5-mile fall, and there are not crocodiles at the bottom. Ain't that right? Let's get the right file for when we need it. Okay. Looking good. Near the mark now. Now this one's a little deceptive because the string is, the fret is now sloping off towards the edge because of how worn it is. So I'm not really going to go much further down than this. I'm going to call that where it's going to be. End of. Good. Now down with these sort of things. Right, get the right one. So again, it's a slow old business. Here we go, switch over. Just a first check, although I know it's way over, so I'm kind of only going through the motions there. So this is one of the reasons why these days more and more I use a kind of a custom adjustable nut arrangement that I make up, which is the reason it's custom. It uses a Tusk adjustable nut insert that was designed for the Gibson Les Paul when their 0 fret arrangement, which they originally made I think out of brass, turned out to notch too easily, which of course it's kind of, anyone could have told you that's exactly what will happen with a 0 fret, and especially one made out of brass. But we are just on just above the mark. Yeah, so I think Gibson, I think because I haven't researched the complete backstory, but I believe that Gibson's response was to remanufacture it in titanium, which I presume would have been pretty expensive, whereas in a stroke of genius, Graphtec saw an opportunity and manufactured an insert which actually returned the nut to a traditional sort of string spacing arrangement, but did it in Tusk, but did it so it's adjustable, so it would sit within the Gibson kind of nut structure, and you could raise it up and down to get the action you wanted, as the original Gibson, well, sorry, as the newfangled Gibson was designed to do. So as soon as I saw those Tusk adjustable nuts, I realised that certainly on any guitar I was doing, even though it didn't have the sort of bass part, the cradle part you might call it, surely I could make one of those out of some other material, and so I did, and I made them out of milliput, which actually has proven to work pretty well. So I make my own now. Yeah, so that's what I do. And the nice thing about that, of course, is it allows me to get quickly to the ideal action instead of having to do this process. But it would look different to, on this guitar. It looks a little homemade in so far as a bass part made out of milliput is always going to look slightly homemade compared to a factory built thing. But I have to say it does the job really, really well, and for my liking, I don't mind the looks of it, slightly homemade-ish. look of the bass unit versus the performance it gives me. So I'm more than happy personally to do that. But of course, some people, you know, would not be comfortable with that. You know, they prefer the sort of traditional look of a solid nut, not one in two parts with an adjustable section. So I get it, you know, that's fine. But I have to say, the freedom to kind of make adjustments at will over time is a real boon. And like I say, it saves me a truckload of time cutting slots by hand. I nearly said another word there. Slots by hand. And also, you've got to remember that this method I can oh so easily overcut. And if I do, then we're kind of back to square one. Tiny bit lower still. Conscious, you know, we always have to watch the sticking out bit of the file to make sure it doesn't crash into the headstock and scrape it. A little bit more. Again, if you go down a certain amount then with the file, you need to kind of follow up with this, because otherwise you get stuck in a rut, really. So we're almost there. Yep, I like it. Right, final one. Oops. And then there's going to be a whole load of sanding, filing going on here to take this back, right back to a nice low profile. May actually have a tiny tweak to do on this. Let's do that before I go on any further. This D is just a fraction off. Yeah, I like it. Same applies here, very close to the edge, or relatively close to the edge, and it feels nerve-wracking, so we'll just try and get the whole thing cut down safely without any risk of it breaking a chunk off the end. When I wrote my ebook, which was focused on showing people how to do these setups with almost no cost in tools, you know, no specialist tools I was aiming for. Sorry, no, they had specialist tools because you made them yourself, but you know, not expensive tools, I should say. And so I focused on how to pretty much do all of your nut slots using just this one file, and it's very effective and it does work. Although you needed this file 50p or a pound maximum, and you needed something to just round out the bottom of the slot, just to try and take off some of the I don't know what the word is, the V-ness of it. And so rather than recommending these expensive files, I suggested that you could use these type of things, which are welding nozzle cleaners. In fact, they're a bit of a pain to use, but if you've got nothing else, you can actually kind of cut. They are designed to abrade slightly and cut, so you actually can end up kind of cutting, rounding out the bottom of the slot using these. And actually, they're for about a £5 plus this, you've got a good little kit going there. You know, so it was all about how to do that for relatively little expense, but to do it really well. And so part of the stage shown in that book is to end up with these beautiful playing actions, but these kind of massive shark's teeth, which look quite scary, and certainly would be a shock to any owner who, you know, came back and saw their guitar with those teeth. Now we're almost there now. But of course, the whole point is that you don't leave those shark's teeth sticking up like that. The aim is to take them down now in a minute to a nice level. Okay. I'm happy with that, although it's out of tune still. But let's get it in tune. Now as I'm tuning, I just want to listen, feel and listen to the way the strings go through these new nut slots now, because this is the whole point of doing this. Nice and smooth and linear. Same here. Good. I like. Okay, so having done that part of it, I'm going to stop in a minute, but before I do that, I'll just do the nut, do the shaping of the nut. So we're not doing any fret leveling, we don't need to. I'm going to take these strings off now, they've done their service. Obviously, I'm going to do the nut shaping right now, and then when we come back after a break, we will go and have a look underneath the arches to see if we can. Oh, I will have a waggle around and see if we can recreate this earth problem before I go under the cover, and then we'll go under and see if there's anything obvious. We know there's a loose jack socket for a start, which won't help things. Sorry, not a jack. We know that the selector switch is iffy. Okay, so here's the crazy bit. Now, if you're nervous and you don't know what to do, why don't you go where Gorilla Tape sits? If you're nervous, right, do that. Right? If you're frightened of using a file near your frets, do that. Don't do it on there, because we already know that's quite an old styly finish and it's not very strong. So just in case you're still really nervous, put a bit of light low tack masking tape near there, so that if you were to slip, you at least note you were kind of hitting the tape before anything else. Now, what I'm aiming to do is I'm aiming to get this, I'm aiming to basically shave this or file this nut it's called. This is a blunt thing. I should really get something not so blunt. What did I say? Full economy goes for a new one. These actually don't last very long at all. This is a substandard type of blade. So yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to shave it down, and we're going to make it look more normal. So bring it back to a workable height above the strings. Now, like I said, the point is nothing above the little groove in which the string sits is needed. Everything else is kind of superfluous. So all of that material above the bottom part of the nut slot is excessive, and it just, like I said, it A, kind of can look very weird, and B, it can, if the slots are straight sided, it can certainly contribute to them gripping the strings. So what I'm going to do is just sharpen that, because I wanted to try and get at least to close to the bottom of these slots and mark them up, so that when I file I can actually see where I am and what's going on. So I have my metal file for this. Turn my thing off a minute. and I'll use the rougher side. Now this, as you know, is quite fragile, so I really just want to cut this down and do it in such a way that I avoid any major splits or bits snapping off, because that could spoil the party just a little bit. So there is a lot of sticking up, or there's potential for bits to break off here. And so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of trying to take it as slowly as possible, and then when we get to the edges, I'm using my fingers to just protect this so it doesn't go off anywhere I can't control it. Okay, so, and then angling it back a bit more, and then once I feel like I've got a fair bit off the back, oh, bit into the edge there quite a bit, then come forward, cut a little more flat, a little more flatly, Michael Flatley for you. So tons to go, see, it's a lot. I'm going to try and just do this one at a more of a 45-degree angle on these edges, because we need to take them down, but we don't want to risk snapping them, because they're currently a bit stranded out there. Now, I've used in the past, I've gone and used you know, Dremel and so on here, but my experience has been that the Dremel can actually it's a little bit insensitive, and it can end up biting off chunks. It will catch a chunk of bone, and then against your wishes you can end up sort of splitting it off the end. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just using this blade, brand new as it is, to just clean out some of these grooves in the file, because they do get gummed up with bone. And in this case I think I was also, yeah, I can feel it, I was also filing some JB weld the other day, so that kind of can quite easily block the files up. So a little bit of that will help, and if you haven't got the time to do it that way, then a little bit of this will work as well, perhaps not quite as effectively overall. So back. So again, if you've got to do this, take your time and just don't rush. Now this will remove the discoloured bits that were on this nut anyway, so the whole thing will kind of look cleaner to begin with. Though obviously when we get down to the low levels, then I've got to be conscious of shaping it a little bit more into sort of a nice arch or curve or whatever. And it's quite hard to remove a lot of material like this, but you will get there eventually. But like I say, there's no quick way. You can change direction if you feel capable, confident. Flatten it out a bit. This is actually this is gummed up a bit on that bit, so only the end bit's cutting very well at the moment. Namely the bit I cleaned up. So ultimately you probably want to end up with it tilting back a little bit, which is a nod to the traditional shape of a nut. And we're sort of slowly getting there, but it is slow. I have to tell you, it is slow, you can see. Let's have a look and see if we can carefully use spinny thing, i.e. without making too much contact. But again, this requires caution and probably avoidance of touching on the end pieces. I might just make sure I do those by hand. Don't want to catch or snag one of those, because that's where it's likely to break off, which is not going to be much good. And so it's turning that way. So you can see that's also quite hard work, and it sort of gets there eventually, but again not hugely quickly. So, you know, a combination of both sounds like the way to go, and you just eventually will end up with a fairly low profile nut which has more than enough kind of slot room to grab the string and hold it in place, but not so much material that the nut sits miles up above. This is what we're aiming for. And then really we want to sort of flatten it off at some point as much as possible. Or flatten it as in between the grooves. And then we look again. Again, it's coming down slowly. We go to the rougher side. I mean, one way of doing it is, if you're very nervous, is work flattish, but kind of with a view of taking the front part down first, because the front part is the important edge, and when you get down to where that should be, you can then tilt back and take more off from the back, because the slots are already sloping anyway, so you've got the kind of the leeway to do that. But it's getting there, but it's still way deeper than I'd ideally want. So I think I'm going to stop. I'll do this off camera now, finish this off, but when I come back it'll be a low level restrained little thing. See you in a minute. So, nut reshape. Lovely, nice and soft. Next stage, we need to have a look under here, because we're going to need to first of all tie down that switch. Tighten it, and we wanted to have a look under there as well. So here we go. These are quite worn out, these screws, but we shall see. So it's quite an interesting old guitar, because the question in here is, you know, what really is this all about? You know, oh blimey. I'll bring it down. I'll bring the camera down so you can see. This is looks like a custom made pickguard from Lollar themselves actually. Oh, come on. So nice Lollar pickups, Melody Maker 2014. Melody Maker 2014. Neck and bridge with a pickguard specially made for it. It says Lollar guitars and pickups. Oh god, my finger's in the way. Sorry about that. And here we have, interestingly, after all of that, we've got a kind of quite a messy pile of stuff in here. Yeah, it is a bit messy. I guess, you know, it works, but wow. And there's a few bits of electrical tape around the place to stop things touching other things out, which of course in this day and age we would have used shrink wrap, you know what I mean. We've got a switch here that's loose, and potentially could be things touching out here as well. It is crudely wired up, I've got to say. I mean, I can't believe Lollar put this together. Would they have just transferred across the original wiring? I don't know. Probably that. Well, no, they can't, because no, I don't know. How do I know? Anyway, it is a bit of a mess under here. There are unnecessary bits of wire. There's a lot of potential for things shorting out here. Actually, that is completely close to the pot. That's in the ground coming into an unused lug. It's not surprising that something isn't quite right there. It's zizzing out and shorting out. So the first thing, let's just get a bit more light on it. From my eyes, possibly not yours. In fact, it probably makes it look really lousy for you to look at, but I want to see closely what's what. So the first thing we're going to need to do is tie this switch down. So we have a lot of this stuff here is is not. We've got a bridge earth, which has got some wire around it, and I don't know whether that's aimed at, whether it's holding something together, or whether it is an absolute mess, or whether it's you know, joining two wires, which could be a problem. But there is a lot of mess in this. Okay, well look, the first thing is we've got this that is spinning around, which we don't want it to be. And the problem with that moving is, yes, it's moving. Wow. So that's bits moving. So why is this? Is there anything touching anything? Well, we can tighten this up like this, like that. Takes care of that. But while we're at it, I want to make sure. Just want to make sure there's nothing touching anything that shouldn't be. Like I say, there's a heck of a lot of wire flopping about here. There's a lot of ground wire that could be getting in the way of other wires, which is, you know, there's a lot of potential for things shorting out here. I'm just going to cut off little excess bits that aren't necessary. Sticky outy bits that just aren't doing anything good to anyone else. Extra long sticky out bits. this one here, the output from the switch is clear of everything, and that ground wire, sorry, that's an input, that's the output from the bridge, sorry, is that bridge? Yes, the bridge output comes perilously close to the top of the pot. Hopefully it will not move any further. This one this one here is a kind of an attempt to put a a shield insulation onto the leg of the capacitor, and then there's just a huge clump of solder, mess of solder. It's ugly, I've got to say. And it's worth taking a picture because it's kind of interesting how that came to be like that. Still, it is what it is, and I really only care to make sure that it stops making a noise. Thanks. Pretty pickups, baby. So this is the original routing. So that's true, the neck stops short here, so the whole of this is to support the neck. There's no continuation, and there's actually there's a reinforcement behind there to stop that splitting, which is quite interesting. I should know because I had to do that on one of my own guitars. Okay, so what wasn't good for me a minute ago was that this was making a noise when we had it plugged in. It was a strange earthing business. Okay, so that moves quite a bit because there's no screw there. That's the first thing. I'm sure that's not a problem. Now it seems to be quieter than when we had the strings on it. Yeah, it's interesting. There is enough room there for a hole, but I guess it's because it's the original script. The original plate doesn't have one, and it would stand out. That must be the only reason. So it must be narrow, just a bit narrower than this. Okay, that sounds okay. I'll go with that being the only thing wrong with it. I didn't notice, to be honest, any major scratching when using the pots and things. So I'm not even going to start spraying contact cleaner around in there. I don't think there's any need for it. So what I am going to do is, having tightened that up, I'm going to replace these screws. I'm going to just give this a little brush down and then replace the screws. This is, wow, what's that? Some sort of goo. Right, I don't know what it is. I'm going to remove it. Yeah, going to put the screws and all back in. Get rid of some of this dust around here. Put the screws back in and restring. Now it just occurred to me that I'm going to just have to check with Chris about the strings on the SG, because I think I've only got one set of these ultralight 8s, and I know that's what he's certainly playing on this, so I can't remember if I ordered some. I better have to look at my eBay orders. I get confused sometimes. Right, so back in with the little screws. That's interesting to see the joint there. Oh look, a little bit of Oh no, it's pencil. I was thinking, oh look, a bit of leftover stuff from the cavity, but it's pencil shavings. Yeah, interesting to see the neck joint only extends exactly as far as that, so there's no heel, whatever. There's no extension underneath that part of the neck. That's it, and it sits inside this little bit, which is actually quite a flimsy joint, really, when all is said and done. And it's obviously, it would be very difficult to, well, you could continue it into here, but you remove most of that by putting a pickup in the neck position, so it would sort of defeat the point. But it obviously works. This has stayed together all those years. And then there was yeah, no shielding or anything inside of there. This being a single coil, not stacked or anything, this could probably benefit from some shielding in a modern sense, although I'm not going to do it because it's not asked for and it's not original. Well, you could say not a lot of this is, but right. I'm going to throw these away because I don't really need a set of 8s. As sacrificial strings, because it's very rare to have them come through. I know these aren't particularly old anyway, but we always replace the strings for the best playing experience. Okay, so we have mainly, on this guitar, we have mainly rescued the nut from being too low cut, and what's this one called? Resomax. Yeah, rescued the nut from being too low cut and and being too grippy actually, so too much friction. So we needed to recut the slots, but actually this is quite flimsy. That's interesting. It's very lightweight. Yeah. So anyway, it's really all about getting this to stay in tune, and we're still not there yet because until I've got the strings on and we've done a bit of stretching, we won't know for sure that this is perfectly cut. I'm pretty confident it will be. We shall see. I'm leaving the truss rod cover off just now because we may need to make another adjustment to it. So all of these strings, by the way, go in the front end. This is very light. But the Tone Pros bridge I've got that's similar to this is quite a bit light, quite a bit heavy all round. The other thing, by the way, is I weighed this guitar at the beginning. Not like it's going to get any lighter, but I weighed it, and it's surprising how much it weighs. What's your guess? Looking at the dimensions of it, you'd think that a guitar this thin and with this little on it really would be light, but it's 8 pounds. Well, there you go. That's a surprise. I do like those pickups. I'm going to have to get me a set. I know my brother is going to go, I told you, because he's a Lollar fan. I think he pretty certainly has Lollar pickups on his custom shop. Telecaster, or a Lollar pickup. In the bridge position. But yeah, I like these Lollar P90s. And I guess these are the Melody Maker named version, so I don't know whether they're even still available. So here we have string number 1 coming forward. Now again, it's not too important if this moves, this bridge, because we can always refit it or readjust it, sorry, for height and action, because we know where we got it down to and we know that it played pretty well as at that action, so we've got room to readjust. So here we go. Now for this is what I would do. I think you had problems, Chris, with string slipping as well as slack, so I pull back a fret's worth and I go round. Now this may not actually achieve the same because they're much bigger posts, so let me see what this achieves. Over the top once, round and underneath. just about. It's not so much different. We might want to go back just a little tiny bit more. Right. Yeah, it stops short by a few mils compared to the normal size, but that's all it translates into. So I'm going to fit all these similarly, and we're going to go just over the 1 fret's worth back, so 1 fret and a finger's worth, and then we're going to go over I go over the top of the loose string and then round on the second time under the loose string, so we have it a sort of locking thing. There you go, that's about right. That is little enough to avoid storing up tons of slack in the coils, and enough to grip. So we should have kind of cured that problem. Now, if there are any more grounding issues, then I will have to have a closer look under here. Oh, this tuner is bent. You know that? Okay, it works easily because it's that big wide thing, but it's actually bent, so it doesn't turn straight. So I'm not very good with the kind of plastic machine, really. Come on, would you go? How strange. Right, sit in properly. Thank you. One and a bit back, switch hands. Oh, blimey, this one, no, this is okay. Over the held one, first time, push it under, stick the loose one, sorry, under the loose one, and over the loose one first time, under the second time. Probably only needs a fret's worth when you get down to the thinner strings. I quite like the ease of turning of these big tuner pieces, but Chris was saying that because they're so big, they catch on things and they're quite well. See, interesting. He said that they regularly put the guitar out of tune, and I'm wondering if he's attributing the guitar being out of tune to that, when in fact my experience of this guitar is, regardless of those, it's out of tune. It was out of tune because of the nut, and also because of the slack, and also partly because of the insufficient amount wrapped around the post. So I'm hoping that what Chris experiences from this guitar next is that suddenly it doesn't seem to go out of tune, and the fact that he might have attributed it to the wrong thing is neither here nor there. I mean, we always kind of try to figure out what it is that's not working right. Now this, you'll see on Chris, when you play this, you'll see that there's a bit of remnants of the graphite that I used to mark the slots for visibility in the nut. That was really just my need to see. While I was filing it down, I wanted to be able to see the nut, the bottom of the slot. Anyhow, it won't harm being in there. It'll, if anything, aid lubrication of the slot, but it's not strictly necessary. It's just there because it's easier than trying to find a way to clean it out. Now on the finer strings, that extra pullback of a fret adds up to more than a couple of times around the post, but it's okay. And the reason for that, in my mind, is that the thinner strings are more likely to slide off. They actually require more winding to grip. Okay, so we have this on, and straight away these strings feel better anchored than they were before. There's not the sense of movement we had before. Obviously in stretching I've got to be a little bit more careful with 8s because they are flimsy by comparison and will break much more easily. So let's get a note off the tuner, or off the machine of amplification. this point it's critical to be listening, or I'm certainly listening and feeling for any pinging. I want to, as I tune, I want the strings to go through the nut really progressively, linearly. Feels good. Much better. Good call. That feels a lot better than it did before. Right, I'm going to do a little bit of stretching from here. Again, being conscious of the thinness of these strings. They're 8s, and so if I start really pushing hard on this, the B and the top E, it's all too easy to break them. So I'm being a little bit careful. And again, it's one of those things that you would have to be a little bit careful when stretching out the first time. But great, no pinging. Lovely. This thing already feels more stable tuning straight away. Can't tell you how big a deal the nut makes. Almost in tune. Oh, let's just check the neck relief while we're at it. Yep, as was, and it's workable and good. So it's good and relatively flat, but still a little bit more curved than it was before. And somehow I've got to get this out, back in. There we go. I don't know how far this little screw wants to go in. It wasn't fully in when it came, so I'm just being cautious with that. Right, a couple more tugs on here, and I'm going to put it on, plug it in, and see, make sure that it stays in tune, pretty much. I mean, this already in 5 minutes, this is more stable tuning than the guitar was after half an hour of me stretching the hell out of it in the front room. So whatever's happened now, it's much more stable than it was, which is great. mean, that's just, to me, it just makes all the difference. If you don't, oh, look at this, I'm wearing a thermal t-shirt and a big padded top. It tells you what the weather's quite like over here. Better? That's more in tune by far than it was before. I'm wondering whether I've not got something wrong with this useless jack lead, which I've never really examined in detail. Let's just test another one, just to make sure that there isn't something wrong with this input. I mean, it is a bit of a claggy solder cluster, which isn't great, but yeah, it is something with that lead. Now, what we don't know is what the intonation is doing with this, and I think for that I'm going to need to go and get my tuner. Or where's the other one? I've lost it now. Tuner. Where are? Oh, here it is. There we go. Let's see how on the money or far off the mark we are with the intonation. Pretty good. G's looking a bit flat. In other words, it's looking a little bit too long. I can sort of get that. It's further back. Same with the E. So I think we've got a little adjustment to do here. Let's get that. So we'll hoik the G forwards as I can get this to fit. Can I get this to fit? Which one brings it back? Oh, let's get one that does actually fit. See, man doesn't trust his guitar straps. Any guitar straps when somebody else's vintage guitar is on the line. Which way am I going? Can I go the correct way? Thank you. No, yes, no, that's the other way. So crap, this Tune-o-matic type system. It takes forever before you even register the thing moving. Judging by physical positioning. Shush, shush everybody. Good. I bet you, judging by the same thing, I bet you the E, well I bet you the D is wrong and the E is wrong. I bet the only one that's right is the A. Watch this. A. That's wrong too. But they could all be wrong, but they're certainly wrong off each other. So we'll do all three of these together. If that one's correct, yeah, maybe. Okay, it says D's good. E's way sharp, which is what you'd expect. It's too far forward. It looks it, so let's push it back, or screw it back, we should say. Which way are we going? Counterclockwise, I think. Wish I knew straight offhand. Counterclockwise. Well, if the D's right, then the A needs to go quite a way back, and we may run out of intonation on the E. That's right. That's about right. That's where we are. Good. That is good. So Chris, the intonation was off there. I've probably got a photograph of it from before so you could see the difference, but I could see visually. So I always say trust the positioning of these little settings, because they are very accurate. You should expect, with 3 wound and 3 plain, you should expect a consistent pattern of intonation on the saddles. Does this work off the microphone? That might be useful. Is a bit too short. Got a feeling. I got a feeling. I'm going to trust my instinct. My instinct is telling me that it's still a little bit short on the high E, and the others off, or the E and the B. I'm just gonna which way round does it have to go? Take a bit off there. Lengthen that. Lengthen that. We can always go backwards, but we can't go forward. No, we can go forwards. We can go backwards and we can go forwards. Which direction is this going in? There is no earthly way of knowing. Are you kidding me? This is coming out. Oi! This is actually coming right out. Thanks, Tune-O-Matic. We don't actually need that to happen. That's crap. It was actually undoing itself. Right, I'm going to go a little bit back on this G as well, and let's see if we can get this feeling a little bit better. It doesn't feel quite right to me, my slightly musical hypersensitive ear. This one is sitting too far out of its little hole, and it doesn't actually want to go back in. Wow, look at that, that's crap. That little thing has popped right out. So the farness back of the what's it is causing this to, it's actually pushing this screw out because it's kind of judging its angle to be too low, too little, too tight. Now if this doesn't stay in place, which it isn't, you've actually got a problem here, Chris. This bridge is not happy because the angle, there's no retaining screw holding this back. No, there isn't. And it's saying this is so close to the back end, it's pushing this particular one forward, and it's moving the intonation point, as you can probably guess. Not ideal. Okay. Difference, but look how much difference that makes. Perfect. Gee whiz. God, aren't our ears brilliant things? Its way out. I'm going to have to have an inspection of this, because this is not ideal. It's where it should be, but this is pushing the saddle forward. Take another close look at something. Yeah, well, I'm getting there. Very close, very close. We're working with eights, and eights are peculiar things because they don't half bend quickly. That intonation is much better, but I don't know if you can see this. This is a fancy for its own good. Too fancy. See this? Look at this. Watch. There you go. You can see that, can't you? That has wandered its way right out to there. And you can physically push it back in, but it doesn't want to, because this string is under pressure and it's trying to come out. So unless there's some sort of retaining clip under there that I know not of yet, all I can do this one time at band camp is slacken this off. I hate doing this now because we're now stressing the string more and more. Right? The only thing I can do is take this out of the way and go, what is this need? What does it need in here to retain this string? Am I missing some clip? Does this one come off? No. So we've got a part of this that will not stay put, and basically, judging by this, it wants to come all the way out, and I don't know if it will come all the way out, but to me that is as broken as it can be. So that's a problem, and I would suggest, Chris, that this isn't going to be your best friend. This is always going to pull forward. I actually can't think of anything to put in here. Yeah, you know what, I can actually. The only thing we can put in here is a physical block of something that's going to hold that in place, because that's physically wrong, man. I don't wish to, I don't like to have to say that, but this thing needs a block of something, you know, temporary, put in there. I'm trying to think what I've got that would just hold it in place until you can either replace the bridge or get it fixed, if that's even possible, and I'm not even sure it is. Simply because you see, you don't even really want it pushing on that. If anything, you want it pushing on both sides. See, it's too fancy for its own good. This one, actually I don't know what stops this. Oh, this one's anchored kind of, is that? No, I don't know what stops that one moving forward, but I bet you £1.50 it does. Okay, look at this. Wow, it's a beautiful thing for £17, right? But you know what? There's no way I can make. Oh, I can make them come forward, but they're sprung. They're sprung. Ha! I can make them come forward, but they're sprung. What a smart move. And this isn't. Which is really, this needs a spring. Everything forward of the line is a spring. Yeah, that is. I didn't even notice that. So this could really use a spring to push it back into its place. But even then, I'm not entirely convinced this thing wants to sit. Oh God, I'm sorry. It's a horrendous kind of noise. Well, that isn't very good, is it? I'm not even sure that that wants to go all the way back. Well, it certainly doesn't with this string in the way, because that's sort of pushing. But yeah, it's definitely not. It actually doesn't want to go back. It's as if there's something caught up in there now that stops this going back. Push it down and it won't go in. So as far as I'm concerned, Chris, this is currently a bit broke. I don't know I don't know the way this is attached inside of there, and I don't know what. And there's another one too moving out of the front here. Yep, that one's also moving. I would get a shot of this, to be honest, because you're going to be stuck with this B, and well, that one was B, and the probably, what was that, the A as well. So they've got no springs in them. That would really help. Would it really help? Yeah, sure it would. It would help push the things back in. There's a reason that's got springs in it. Anyway, maybe somebody's taken them off in the past, but the point is you're now left with something that will not stay in the right place. So all I can do is allow it to come forward to where it wants to rest, and hope that I've pushed the saddle far enough. Let's push the saddle a bit further along and let it come out to its own thingy, which I really don't like. It feels very ungood. Right, now that's kind of out of position at the moment, but on the basis that this is going to, oh wow, it's pulled it so far forward it's not funny. That should be sprung, man. See, what I don't know is whether that then comes out of there, and it's going to cost a whole new set of strings to take this all apart and try and find a solution to this. And it's not, I have to say, it's not on my, that's terrible. It's not on my remit. I think the only thing I can imagine getting anywhere with on this is a little bit of this stuff, and it may not be enough. But let's just see what's possible to begin with. If we can get a bit of this foam, and whether a little bit of this foam would just keep that thing sitting where we want it instead of crawling forwards. Now I don't say it will. There's no earthly reason why a piece of foam is going to do that. But let's have a quick look, see if it adds anything to the business of holding it in place. Just in principle, right? I don't think it's a very good idea. if I may say so myself. You can't see what I'm doing here, but I was trying to squeeze. Let's see if I can do it from here. I was trying to squeeze a bit of this foam into the gap here without involving the string. So kind of building a little natural spring into it, kind of. And then with this pushed in a bit further, stuffing a bit more into there, because we can always pull this foam out afterwards. It's only serving a bit of a purpose. Actually, you know what this might just do for now, Chris, and I may just invite you to live with it for the time being, although it's actually quite offensive. Yeah, that's going to keep it. It'll creep forward a little bit, I think, but that's almost keeping it in roughly where it needs to be. Bridges, eh? Don't you just hate them? No, this is crap. It's not staying where it's supposed to stay. It's just it's gonna roll forward. Now, frankly, at this point, it is pretty much where it should be, but not happy with it as a unit. That's terrible. Why are there no springs? I don't even know what kind of bridge this is, but there are no springs on it, and there's a reason why there are springs there. So that won't be helping the situation. It offends me, man. I really don't. I cannot see a way of stopping this happening, and the reason it's happening is quite simple. Is that without springs in it, as soon as the saddles, it's not really doing much. Might as well almost pull that out. But as soon as the saddles go anywhere to align, to intonate, come anywhere near the back, this string is not pushing down; it's pushing forwards. So it's pushing the whole unit forward, and it's doing it on the B for some reason. I don't know why it's not doing it so much on the G. The G, there's something that should stop this moving forward. That's my feeling, but it really isn't, as you can see. So, but it, it isn't helped by the fact that this when it's near the back, it's pushing. The string is pushing against like that, whereas when it's sort of in the middle, it feels much more of a downward force. But I think that's crap, and have to say that a way around that would be to replace it. You'd actually do worse than replacing it with one of those, although that's not, it's not a Tone Pros, it's a fake. But okay, I'm gonna. Oh, let's see. That's the other thing you have to do. Don't like that. Yeah, so we're gonna have to just hold it there, and we're going to need to report that in, and then we can take out the foam if required. I mean, maybe it's stopping it running too far along there. Maybe it has to just sit out where it sits at and leave the saddle be. Hopefully it'll be in the right place, but it's just it's not right. So it's not a massive deal. It's not the main problem of detuning and so on, or going out tune, has been cured with the nut and the careful stretching, but this is a small issue around getting the intonation right, which it will never be right as long as it's got this bridge and this is happening to it. So I just thought that's a good point to stop, because it looks great, but it's unless there's something I can or someone can fix, but it's going to cost us a set of strings to do it, because having put these strings on now, I haven't got a replacement set to take these off again and to try and get this thing to lock into place. However, it doesn't appear there isn't anything there that's obvious that I can press this into in order to get it to to lock. Okay, and I don't know whether or not I can get it all out. So really, it's as it stands right now. Even pushed out to this maximum out, it is actually intonated about right there. So I've kind of set it up for or left it go to its sort of default badness. But I think this is a new bridge time for this, and I tell you what, that wouldn't be a bad alternative. It's got everything you need on there, and it's got springs to stop this thing, and the spacing is exactly the same. But there you go. All right, I hope you found that interesting. For me it was. It's a very different beast. I don't get a lot of these in here, but my main focus on this, as you saw, was to cure this lousy out of tune or lousy tuning stability, and the only way to do that was through the nut. And rather than put a new one in and start again, I thought we'll kind of put a boot on the other one, which keeps the original material in, which has a bit more kind of credibility to it. Yeah, great. Go in and just I'll send a message to Chris to see what he says. But I'll take a couple of close-up pictures to make sense of it. But there we go. So lots of little things. Who's 11 AM? Who's this calling me? Help. 11 AM when? Help. 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 Sorry. Who sent me that message? Don't know. Don't know. This, you can never tell. Not come in there. I'm on schedule for 11 AM. Is that an email? Not there. Promotions. Where's primary? Oh man. Nope. Nope, no, no. Yeah, I've got that. Fine. Okay. So it's one of these things, you get a message and it's not email, it's not, what else could it be? It's not Messenger. Nope. Is it WhatsApp? Nope. So who was telling me they were on schedule? Well, you see that? I have no idea. I'm on schedule. Messages. 11 AM. Messages. Where are messages? Okay, down here. Oh, this is back on Friday. So why did I just get that now? Holy crap. So that's from Chris last Friday. Anyway, right, pictures. Sorry. So convenient. That was Chris. So let's have a look. What can we see? There we go. Let's get a couple of pictures of Chris of this bridge and its problems. Okay, and then the fact that there's no springs in there to hold it in place, whereas by contrast we have another version which does indeed have springs as an alternative. Does the same thing, only has springs. Right, and there's the nut. Delightful, isn't it? Alright, we're done for now. Time for a break. Thanks for watching. See you again. Okie dokie, here we are again, back on another rainy day. Well, it's the next day. Now, between then and now, I've had a chance to speak to the email with the very good people, very helpful people at Graph Tech, which I believe is in Canada. Anyway, it just sort of worked nicely with the time differences. And I asked them a question about the saddle on this guitar, the saddle on this bridge, and They said helpfully that there is a in that saddle, no, in the saddle there is a circlip, or it's held the thingy should be held in place by a circlip. Now, I unfortunately, in order to have a good look at this to see if there's anything we can do to fix this, I'm going to have to take these strings back off, which I hate to do because it sort of weakens strings to put them on and off, but I have no choice. I've got to get into the undersides of this bridge, and I can't see without taking the strings off. So we are back there, and I'm going to have a look and close up. I might even find, if I get my magnifying glass out and see if I can spot where these wicked circlips have gone. I thought for a minute on Google I had a look for circlips for this bridge, and I thought I found a page, and the page appeared to be Graph Tech, so I sort of went there and it went to some sort of strange drugs for sale page, which is no good. Yeah, God blimey. I'll tell you something, there is not going to be any way of getting in here really. I guess I don't really need to take the strings out as such. Should be able to see from just inside. The shed is full of oak sawdust at the moment because I just bandsawed some wood for my stepmom's little arbour in the garden that I put together the other day, and it's the support post that came with it. It's too short and too weedy to hold bodies, so I've cut a lump of oak to fit instead. But I'm just chucked a load of sawdust around. I haven't actually got this magnifying glass off the shelf for years, so it's actually covered in dust as well. And it's a bit overkill, but I just want to have a close-up look to see if I can see, because it may well be that this bridge has circlips holding the bleeding pins in, but I can tell you something, if I can't see them, then you might as well not have them. Right, let's have a look. I feel like one of those, do I feel like one of those jewelers? Not really. Okay, so we've got this screw goes into God, sawdust goes into, maybe too dazzling now. Right, it goes into a hole at the back, so the pin can't be at that end, it has to be at this end. Okay, there's the clips, and that's right. I see, sort of see. Is that the clip? Well, I think I do have to get the strings out to see this at work. Let's begin. Let us begin. Now, the funny thing is, on this bridge, the strings only go in one way, which is unusual, and that they normally they just roll up here, but this thing organises them sort of flat, so it twists them round, which is a good idea. It slots them in nicely. So before I do any further, it probably does make more sense if I just try and straighten these out. Now, this is one of the points at which, when you reuse or take strings off and try and do something with them, this is where you tend to can't avoid getting some stress into the string. Now, if you're very careful, you can do it, and you get a string that you can remove without hooking it on and breaking it or doing anything else negative to it. So because I don't have another set of 8s here in time for Friday, what I'd like to be able to do is to fix this and then be ready for Chris on Friday. So I'd much rather use these relatively almost new strings and be ready for Friday than to be sitting around waiting for replacement strings to arrive, which I have ordered anyway just in case, but you know, that then condemns me, inverted commas, to couriering it up to him, which I think, you know, given these sort of vintage nature of these guitars, I think he would be much more comfortable not couriering them. And I get that, you know, although I've said many times along the way that so far I have literally and statistically, it's not a kind of a figure of speech, I have 100% no loss, no damage record on I should say no mishap, no loss, no damage, no nothing, mishap, no mishap record on probably 500 plus sends, courier sends using parcel force. And the thing about that is that it is statistically a fact. You know, it's you know, I can get into discussions sometimes with people on Facebook, funnily enough, or wherever good discussions are had. Not, you know, and you'll get into this discussion where somebody says, "Oh, I sent a guitar via parcel fail or whatever, farce or whatever they call it, and they trashed it, and this, that, and the other happened." And I go, "Well, I hear what you're saying, and it may have a lot to do with the packaging. For example, my experience is da da da," and then I politely suggest that I've had 500 plus, possibly more, successful sends, and I literally have a 100% no loss, no damage, and it goes absolutely nowhere. Their one experience of parcel farce, their one time that they put something in a box and packaged it to the way that they did that one time, possibly the only time they sent a guitar, because it was too traumatic and they never did again. But you know, the one time they did it versus the 500 plus times I've done it is the only thing they see, and they will still continue to argue why they're terrible. And it's just, there's such a narrow-minded thing that goes on there, and it's this, I often whinge about this, but it's this thing about, you know, we've reached this place where personal experience is made to count for more than fact, you know. And now, of course, the first thing is, when I post on there, you could say technically the person reading my thing might go, "Well, I don't even know if he's telling the truth. Who is this guy? Maybe he hasn't," you know. So I either have or haven't sent 500 plus guitars successfully with parcel force. That's the first hurdle. So, you know, kind of logical people will go and sort of chat, "Oh yeah, you really love guitars, yeah, no, I can't see why you would be lying unless it's been paid by parcel force, of course." And their conspiracy theories could start there, it's not unknown. Anyhow, so you go to that sort of level, and then you say, well, if I assume that he's telling the truth, can I allow the fact that, or can I, if I accept that it's a fact that he's had 600, whatever it is, 500 plus sends, can I allow that fact to impinge on my own single experience, you know, my deeply painful personal experience? And you to just be incredibly amazed that people can't. You know, they will still continue on the basis that parcel force are absolute rubbish because it once didn't work for me. And end of story. So yeah, it doesn't really work when I enter into those conversations, because those people's bad experience colours it and they cannot see past it. So it's just a very good example of just how powerful the personal experience thing is. That was a bit of foam. Now, right, there's this one. You can see it sort of popping in and out. Now, I'm looking at this circlip, and it's a little wiry clip that's at the back, and technically it's supposed to retain this little thing. Now, from what I can see, which is a bit better now, sorry you won't get a good view of this, but since I'm doing this anyway, so what I can see is that there needs to be some way that this sits, this little circlip sits further back, if at all possible. And whether or not that's even doable is another matter, because on this one, and actually possibly on the other one, that one's not coming out, but this one definitely is. So on this one, it seems difficult to get that circlip into place. Well, I suppose I shouldn't be complaining, because the good news is the circlip is there. So let me move this little block out of the way and see if we can then push this further back in. Well, currently, well, it's now trying to retain it. Ooh. Well, that's good, except if it comes out again when I put some load on it, it isn't good. You get what I'm saying? Sorry, boring for you, I know. There's the B. So let's now go, if we now go, because it seems to have walked itself into the right, well, is it in the right position? Still doesn't look quite right, but let's pretend it's in the right position. And now we go back the other way, and what it's doing is it appears to be, as I undo this, it appears to then drag the circlip backwards. Actually, it doesn't seem to do that at all, it's actually coming all the way out. Okay, let's put that back in. You can see the pin there. Let's push it forward a bit more, if we can. That needs to be under. See, that's one of the problems. That needs to be underneath this little roof. But it would be good if this does fix, because it will save time and money and allow us to get to the correct intonation, which we were nearly there except for this wandering B, which is kind of correct there. Let's have a push. Well, maybe. No pun intended. Maybe. Resomax rap. Resomax rap. It's a Resomax rap, baby. Well, it's trying to come out, but it's not coming out, which is encouraging. Shall we call it fixed? So what it appears to have happened, what appears to have happened was that the little circlip had come undone. Now I've got a feeling that it's likely, possibly, may well do such again. It's every likelihood, isn't it? But it ain't so bad, because at least we know what it is, my man. So, oh, while I was there, why not, just for fun, just wanted to try this out. Now, it would need its own posts for this. They're slightly different thickness, but I've got the post there, but it would need this. Anyway, that was just as a get out of jail free kind of thought. But there we are. Right, let's go at it again. Now I'm just wondering whether, and Chris, this might be worth kind of considering, when you put them on the first time, the only thing I don't think I did, or I'm pretty certain I didn't really take care of or pay attention to, because I didn't expect the strings to go into this little slotted bit in one particular sideways plane, I kind of just pulled them through as if it was a standard bridge where the strings just sort of sit in whatever, you know, the ball end sits wherever it wants, and in this case it has to turn. Now I don't know whether it's possible that in that case this turning of the ball once it was in there may have had something to do with moving the circlip, because they seem to be closely connected or related. So there's a possibility. So you probably know this better than me since you've had this guitar a while. Maybe that's a consequence of just kind of letting this find its own plane, whereas here you can see I'm kind of taking care to fit it in, which is the only thing I didn't do the first time round. I just sort of I pulled it until it kind of went in. Now maybe that pulling of it at an odd angle, slightly sideways, maybe that had something to do with dislodging the circlip. I can't say for sure, for I know not, but I'm sort of trying to do it differently to be sure that it works this time and doesn't dislodge anything if that's what happened. Again, I say I have no idea if that is what happened, but I am just thinking out loud, which you'll know is what I always do. In fact, Claire said to me the other day, she said, "You're talking to yourself a lot more these days." And then we went into a shop in town and there was a birthday card, or some sort of card saying, speech bubble, "You talk to yourself a lot more these days." And then the guy said, "Yes, that's because I know I need expert advice." Arf. Right, I think we should be okay. And of course I've got to, having now once put the strings on and cut the thing once, I have to now make sure I get this on pretty much exactly the same much of wind on as before, no less, no more. but I have to be careful because it does mean it reuses the same stretch point, which if it is going to break, it's going to break at this point of refitting, which I don't want it to do because it's a right pain, but I want it to hold the tuning and I want it to hold the posts better than it previously did. I think one of the things I just sent an email to Chris actually, and one of the things I didn't mention in that email about these posts was I think the reason why there may have been not enough wind on the post is possibly more likely to be because not because he was doing anything different, but because these posts are a bigger diameter, and so you might go to your normal amount of pullback, if you call it that, in order to put the strings on, as I would do, but then actually find that less you would need more to get as many coils as you normally have on the string, because these are a much bigger diameter. Does that make sense? So you might pull back your normal, I don't know, 1 fret's worth, and then suddenly that fret's worth is normally enough to wrap twice round a standard post, but on these oversized posts you might suddenly find that it doesn't wrap on as much and actually not quite enough to hold those thin slippy strings. And I think that's what's happened here. Not that Chris has chosen to, you know, only put on half a wrap. I think he's been caught out by the by kind of a combination of sort of habit of how much you wind on, followed by these unusually large diameter posts. Which is why when I sort of got a whiff of that, my first thing to do was to make sure that I pulled back a bit further and gave it more than the usual frets worth. Went to one fret and a finger's worth. Now, the problem with this is getting this through and bending and catching without it, because it's going to go this way and it wants to go this way, and this is an unusual tuner thing. What do they call that thing? The spade, petal, knob. Somebody called it something when it seemed to make perfect sense, and I've since forgotten, and I continue to use knob or something. Spade, petal, rose, leaf, button, whatever you might want to call it. Now, brilliantly, I've gone around the outside of the bridge there. That's a real star achievement. So now I want to get back enough to take it off the bridge without damaging it, and to not lose the wind on that I've already got. Thank you, bridge. That's really helpful. So you might want to change these strings at a not as late a date as you might otherwise have done, Chris, and that's because we've had to take the bridge off to refit and find the little thing. Good, I'm happy that has come back to normal. So I just need to really do a bit of stretching to get it to seat. Now, kind of recognising that it's already been a bit crimped, and therefore its sort of tendency is going to be to break sooner rather than later, I'm afraid. Not really much I can do about that. If by Thursday the new set of 8s comes, I'll fit them, but meanwhile we'll live with these. Look, that's been left on all night, as always. Now I know this was in open G, but I'm kind of leaving it in standard tuning just because I want to make sure it plays the way I kind of understand it and play. Before I box it up and send it back. going back in its box for now, ladies and gentlemen, and that concludes the remedial action on the Melody Maker. I will stretch it a little bit more in the house to make sure it's stable as stable can be. Hurrah! Done. Next step, taking apart the tuners on the vintage Gibson SG. See you in a second.